Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. First, let me say, whoever posted that Twitter account called Dwyer's Cat, very funny. Very funny. Came across it, thought it was hilarious. I'm not sure if it's still up, but my cat and I thank you. Okay? People over here got a big laugh about that. Okay, today is July 30th. Let's talk about some boxing stories that are bouncing around YouTube and bouncing around my page. First, Robert Guerrero. Right? There's a huge difference of opinion, huge, on my page concerning Robert Guerrero. Many in YouTube Nation have commented on that post-fight video and have said that they don't believe Robert Guerrero belongs in the same area code as Floyd Mayweather. Right? They believe that Guerrero, quite frankly, isn't ready, and that Guerrero got hit way too much. And I agree, he did get hit a lot by Selçuk Aiden's right hand. The argument is, if Selçuk Aiden is primarily a right-handed fighter, and if Guerrero got hit repeatedly with that right hand, then how good of a defensive fighter is he? And if you don't have great defense against Floyd Mayweather, since we know Mayweather has great defense, how do you expect to compete against Mayweather? There are also comments about Guerrero's punching power. Many people felt that Aiden, was able to take Guerrero's best shots. Now, let me say this. There are fighters out there. Let me name one. Kelly Pavlik, who has a lot of talent. Sergio Martinez today claims that Kelly Pavlik was the toughest opponent he's faced. Just Google that. Right? He has a lot of talent. But in my opinion, his reflexes have dimmed to the point where I'd be nervous betting on Kelly Pavlik in a competitive match. In other words, I'm seeing Kelly get hit with punches he didn't get hit with before. Now, with Guerrero, it's an open question. I thought it was a strategy thing. I thought Guerrero, who was coming off of rotator cuff surgery and a 15-month, ring hiatus, I thought Guerrero was rusty. I also thought Guerrero thought that Aiden was vulnerable inside because Aiden seemed to need space to land that right hand. So I thought Guerrero tried a few tactics, right? One was to try to duck under Aiden's punches. That didn't work. He got hit flush. Then I thought he tried to smother Aiden's punches. Now, I'll have to keep an eye on Guerrero to see if his defense has just deteriorated like I believe Kelly Pavlik's has deteriorated. But the Robert Guerrero who beats Michael Casitas, and that tape's up on YouTube, in my opinion, has more skills and faster hands than some of the much bigger names in the sport right now. I have no doubt that if Guerrero, who's 5'8", 5'9", fights Saul Alvarez, I believe Guerrero would outbox him. Now, he may lose the fight because Alvarez is really a super middleweight, right? Masquerading as a junior middleweight. Alvarez comes in the ring weighing about 167, 168. He's Andre Ward's, weight. Put it that way. And I'm not sure if Guerrero, who, let's be clear, jumped 2 weight classes to fight Selçuk Aiden, I'm not sure if Guerrero is ready to get hit like Shane Mosley got hit when he faced Saul Alvarez. But I have to say, if Guerrero starts moving around the ring on Saul Alvarez and starts fighting off his back foot like I thought he should have fought Selçuk Aiden, I don't know how Saul Alvarez would beat him. I don't know how Josecito Lopez would beat him, right? I don't know how Paulie Malignaggi, who has a belt at 147, would beat him, just off skills. Guerrero can just drop a combination on demand. And he also has, in addition to fast hands and fluid combinations, he also has a pretty good jab that he can use to keep distance. And keep in mind, he spent his career diffusing very aggressive fighters like Michael Casitas. So I really don't know what some of the bigger names would do against him. I think that he's definitely a guy you need to keep an eye on. And Andre Berto, another big name at 147. I have no doubt that Guerrero outboxes Berto. But just like with Saul Alvarez, the question is simply, can Guerrero take Berto's punch? More importantly, is Guerrero silly enough to actually try to eat several of Berto's right hands like he ate Selçuk Aiden's right hands? Right? Let me also say something about Selçuk Aiden. He was unbeaten. Selçuk Aiden had been dodged for years by the elites at 147. Right? He's been a mandatory for a while. And so understand, people are saying, oh, Selçuk Aiden was able to take his punch. I think it's too early to tell whether Guerrero's punch doesn't translate at 147 or Aiden's chin is one of the better chins at 147. Understand, Aiden had never been knocked out going into the match. So all I can say is I think Guerrero is a fighter you need to know. I agree he got hit way too much, but you're talking about a guy who averaged 80 punches a round against Aiden. I just don't think that Canelo can handle that kind of volume. As for Josecito Lopez, I just don't think he can fight on his back foot, and I just feel that the kind of pressure he brings is not that much different than the kind of pressure brought by Michael Casitas, right? Keep in mind, both guys, Casitas and Lopez, really earned their keep at lower weights, right? And of course, Paulie Malignaggi, in my opinion, is primarily a one-handed fighter. And I don't know how he would deal with a slick southpaw like Robert Guerrero. I think Guerrero takes that match. Okay, I'd love to hear more comments from the public on it. Let's talk about 50 Cent and TMT Promotions. They recently announced that in addition to having Andre Durrell and Yorkis Gamboa, and of course we know if it's the money team, Floyd Mayweather's also fighting for them. They've also signed Billy Dib. Now let me say this. Dib's an interesting individual. He is the IBF featherweight champion, right? Billy Dib reminds me of Sugar Ray Leonard. He has great legs. He doesn't dance around the ring. He hovers around the ring, right? Phenomenal legs. He also has great upper body movement, right? You throw a punch, and the Ray Leonards of the world, the Alis of the world, in fact, quite frankly, if you really look at the film, the Vitaly Klitschko's of the world, they don't even raise a hand to block the punch, right? They just lean back. They're leaners, right? They can be right in front of you. You throw on them. They can literally just lean and dodge punches, right? It's all timing. They don't need to put a hand up. And it makes them much faster than the average fighter, right? Because if I can lean and have your punch end here, then I can come back with a punch. I don't have to untangle defense to throw a punch. I can literally lean, and if I'm skilled, I can come back with leverage, right? Now the problem with Billy Dib, and it's a big problem in my opinion, is sometimes he forgets to land punches. In other words, he's so good at moving his feet and positioning himself around the ring that, like Pernell Whitaker many years ago against Oscar De La Hoya, you know, he's not throwing a lot of punches. He's just making you miss. He's embarrassing you. Sometimes for him, that's enough. In other words, he really enjoys the sport. He really enjoys dancing around the ring, making you look foolish. So if you look at the one fight he lost, the Steve Lovano fight, you're going to see that he did everything in that fight. Everything. Except land punches. Right? The judges were unimpressed. They, ruled against him. He lost a unanimous decision. Since then, he's come back. He's won a title. Keep in mind, in his career, he's only 26. He's already won 2 titles. Right? The IBO Super Featherweight Championship and the IBF Featherweight Championship. He's the current IBF Featherweight Champion. So that opens the door to a host of huge fights, right? You have a whole group of boxers down there, Johnny Gonzalez, many others, who would be fascinating against Billy Dibb. And I just think that, right now we need to look at the money team as a major player in the sport because they have enough big name fighters, right? Yorkis Gamboa I consider to be a big name. He has a following in boxing, right? Everyone knows who Andre Durrell is. If you throw those two on a card with Floyd Mayweather, and if you add Billy Dibb in an IBF Featherweight Championship, right, you're talking about a lot of action. Let me say something controversial too. One of my favorite fighters personally is Nonito Donaire, right? Prime Donaire, to me, channels Sugar Ray Robinson, right? He is your prototypical boxer puncher. But lately, I'm noticing that Donaire isn't moving that much. He's headhunting in fights. He's just stalking guys, right? Now, the question is, and it's an open question, if Donaire fights a Billy Dibb, will Donaire be able to catch up with Billy Dibb? Right? Will Billy Dibb be able to live off his back foot enough and jump in sporadically enough to upset Nonito Donaire, who's increasingly becoming lower volume? I think that's an open question. Right? I think Dibb is in the mix. I think that there are a lot of things to be decided down at his weight class. I think that's a major signing. Let's talk about the other side of the game. Hank Lundy. Hank Lundy recently fought on Friday Night Fights. Now, Lundy was in line for a title shot until he lost to Raimundo Beltran, right? I know Dwyer VIP subscribers are smiling on this one. We did okay on that match. But let me say this, right? Boxing 360 actually tried to prevent that Friday night fight from happening. They sued Lundy because, of course, they had paid Lundy a retainer, and they were supposed to be Lundy's promoter, right? But then Lundy, and this is a story fans need to be aware of, right? Because it happens more than you'd like to believe in boxing. Lundy filed for bankruptcy. And in bankruptcy court, you can actually get some contracts nullified. Right? So, just like Victor Ortiz filed for bankruptcy years ago to get a boxing contract nullified so he could sign with a new group, so too apparently did Hank Lundy. So there's a question on whether exactly the timing matches up, right? Because Lundy presumably wanted to get an old contract nullified. This is after receiving the retainer for the old contract, right? So he could go with a new team. Now, think about it, right? That new team is CES. Now, I'm sure CES was expecting Lundy, a big favorite. I believe he was something like a 4-1 favorite to beat Raimundo Beltran. And I'm sure they stepped in, understanding the litigation risk, thinking that they had a fighter on the cusp of greatness. Now it's a mess. Because, of course, by losing to Beltran, Lundy's career path has been slowed, and now you have the old promoter suing the new promoter. Right? Well, not the new promoter, but suing Lundy, and of course trying to enjoin his fights. Let me just say too, in boxing there's a lot of litigation. Within the last 2 weeks, Frank Warren in the UK has given his blessing for prodigal fighter James DeGale to continue fighting as long as he gets his 25%. In other words, he's taking a slightly different tact. He's like, look, James, go ahead. You want to leave me? Go ahead and fight for your new group. Just break off and give me what I'm supposed to get under our contract. Right? Now, my point to you is, we all know in team sports, we're seeing it now with the Dwight Howard situation. We all know in team sports that sometimes guys with contracts that are running out will sign with new teams, right? There'll be trades where the new team will then sign the guy to a longer term deal, right? But will have to give the guy's old team some money. In other words, in the NBA right now, if you want Dwight Howard, you're going to have to work out something where Dwight Howard's current group, the Orlando Magic, get something in return, right? It's my understanding the Lakers are still talking to the Orlando Magic. I'm not sure if they'll be able to get something done, right? Because Dwight Howard won't play ball. He said that with his new team, he's not going to sign a new contract. Well, in boxing, the same type of dynamic works, right? James DeGale had a contract with Frank Warren, right? Some new group came and said, hey, DeGale, we'll handle your career a bit differently. We'll give you even more riches, right? So, of course, that can happen in boxing, but if you're going to play that game, then you need to make a deal with Warren to get DeGale out of that contract. If you don't, then you need to break off the 25% that Warren is owed under the contract. What this has led to with some boxers is this has literally led to boxers not fighting for years. Look at Carlos Molina's record. You're going to see Molina went some long period of time without fighting because he didn't want his old group to get any of his current money, right? So just keep an eye on that part of the boxing game. Just know that Hank Lundy, after losing to Raimundo Beltran, is still involved in ongoing legal proceedings. That's a part of the game. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments for me here online. I think Guerrero's undervalued. I agree. He didn't look as great as he could have in his last fight, but keep in mind the closest judge had Guerrero winning that fight by 4 rounds. Keep in mind Selçuk Aydin himself after the fight said that he had lost it. Right now, all I can say is you need to ask yourself, if he were to fight Jose Cito Lopez, what exactly would Lopez do? Lopez, who doesn't hit as hard as Aydin, what exactly would Lopez do to get by Guerrero's jab? And if Guerrero were to fight Canelo, understand Guerrero's 5'8". In other words, the size difference isn't really that much of a height difference. And I'll say this, because Alvarez loads up on his punches, right? Guerrero would probably know how to, outland Canelo. Guerrero would have the volume advantage. Keep in mind, too, Guerrero's a southpaw, right? You know what they say. To beat a southpaw, come in with a straight right hand. But here's the corollary. The reason it's a right hand is because a good southpaw knows how to neutralize your left. right? If Guerrero is able to neutralize Canelo's left hook, where does that leave Canelo? Because Canelo, in my opinion, would probably be losing on the scorecards, right? Don't get me wrong. Canelo certainly is the bigger fighter with the bigger punch. He would certainly have a puncher's chance of that fight. But would he have a chance to win by decision? I doubt it. Let me hear from you. Thanks for watching.